Hello, welcome to the Better Ways podcast with me, Tom.
And I'm Jamie.
Hi, Jamie. How you doing?
Very good, thank you. It's been a while
It
since we've
has
done this. You've been a busy man.
another year,
Oh
another year older, another year greyer.
well, yeah. Every day is a blessing, though.
Yeah,
That's the way I
exactly,
look at it, anyway. I
exactly.
was um I was out for a friend's birthday yesterday,
Hmm.
and she's like early 30s. Obviously, I'm not
Yeah.
early 30s, and we ended up going back to another friend's house, and
Hmm.
people that live in that house are all like mid to late 20s, early 30s. I felt so ancient; it was unbelievable.
Yeah, that.
I felt myself giving fatherly advice as well, and I'm not a father, but maybe the grey beard kind of
Yeah,
led me down that path.
it's certainly true that as you get older, you get that effect of
Mm.
you know feeling a bit old or feeling a bit disconnected from younger people or seeing how differently they live. But we were all
Yeah,
young once, so you
we were.
know.
Do you know what? We were in a restaurant, Tom, and
Hmm.
in Clapham, and I think the average age must have been 22 in there.
Wow. Wow.
Oh, like proper young. I was
Yeah.
looking around at all these people like having their bottomless brunches and lunches, and I was just like, did I ever look that young? Well, that's just aging, though, isn't it? Like,
Yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah,
just,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
But I think
There we are.
it's also a mental it's a mental frame. So it's easy to start
Mm,
thinking of yourself as older, and then to start thinking of all the things that you can't do or you can't do as well as you used
mm.
to do. So it can be a bit of a trap. So
Yeah. Oh, I agree. I totally agree. Yeah, I'm quite a big advocate for. I think you start looking older and getting older when you
mm,
act older. So for
mm,
me, I'm quite childlike at times. Still, I take pleasure in very very simple things, and I
yeah,
still do a bit of gaming, and I still go out drinking with friends and all that stuff. And yeah, and I think that's kind of helped maybe slow down my aging by about
good,
18 months.
good. Yes, childlike rather than childish. Yes, that's it.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you said to me that before we started that you'd heard about something that could really help people's health around long
Mm.
COVID. I thought might be relevant since we've started talking about this. Can you
Yeah,
tell me
that's a
what
good
it is that
shout.
you've heard about?
Yeah, it was so a mutual friend of ours sent it over,
Mm.
and it was a link to an ITV report, an
Mm-hmm.
ITV article, and a video as well. And it was again people that had some very bad experiences with COVID. So
Mm-hmm.
both people, I think they mentioned in each video, like basically in intensive care, people were dying on their ward. They both felt like they were going to die. They
Mm.
felt that awful. And then
Mm.
luckily they pulled through. Thank God they pulled through. But they were the extreme examples of what long COVID can do. Like couldn't get
Mm.
out of bed. He goes, if I walk say 1,000 steps, in a day, I'd be in bed for 2 days. And he goes, 1,000 steps is
Yes.
nothing. So he genuinely couldn't function.
Yes.
And then these researchers, I can't remember which hospital it was, or yeah,
Mm.
it was definitely a hospital rather than a university, I think. And they did a clinical trial, again, divided the participants into two groups, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, both groups showed improvements, power of placebo, but
Yeah.
the group that actually had the substance, the pill, actually showed massive improvement. And this guy, the one that nearly passed away and has
Mm.
really struggled with it, he's saying literally within a matter of days, he went from being taking 1,000 steps and having to spend 2 days in bed to doing 20,000 steps a day. His brain fog has
Wow.
gone. Yeah, his lung capacity is back to where it was, and
Wow.
it's basically it's almost I think it's a probiotic, so very
Right.
good bacteria mixed with other things as well. But the results are stunning. Like that, just to think
Wow.
for a moment that something so simple can make
Mm.
such a difference. Particularly as they were saying there's like 1.2 or 1.3 long COVID sufferers in the UK.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That is
Yeah.
absolutely crazy. So if we can get those people fighting fit again, what an accomplishment that would be. It's called Your Guts Plus.
Your guts plus. Okay, I'll have to have a look at that.
Yeah,
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 I've got friends who suffer still from long
mm,
term effects, but I'm fascinated to know how a probiotic could sort that out. So, and it's something that
mm,
presumably is gut related.
yeah,
I mean, I've been reading more about the negative consequences of the vaccines as they've
right,
emerged.
yeah,
Obviously, as we've been giving vaccines for long enough now for some longer term effects to occur.
yeah,
I was watching John Campbell's podcast the other day, and he was saying that one of his theories is that with these mRNA vaccines, the newer style ones, so not the AstraZeneca, but the Pfizer
mm,
Moderna style, because they work in a completely different way. Um, they don't give you something that triggers that directly gives you the antibodies. They give you they deliver some messenger RNA into your cells, and your cells then generate antibodies to the virus.
Mm.
But what he was saying was that when they inject, say, into your arm, and if that's where it takes place and it diffuses through the body, you get a swelling in your arm, and you get some inflammation, because that's a normal part of the process as your cells start to express basically the antibodies that are required to fight COVID.
Right.
He was saying that he didn't see why with mRNA why it would necessarily stay related in the arm, but it could go anywhere in the body. It could travel anywhere in the body, and it could actually happen in the heart. And if that process happens in the heart, if that's where it goes to, that's where it starts to generate the antibodies, then you're going to get inflammation in the heart, which is myocarditis, which is what we've seen increased, particularly in young people, particularly in young men. We've seen increased rates of myocarditis and inflammation and some heart attacks for younger people, including sports people, players on the pitch, that sort of thing. So he has a theory that yes, it's intended to be done in some innocuous place like your arm, but obviously if they happen to inject into the bloodstream, then that carries it straight to the heart quickly. It could happen there instead or somewhere else and cause problems, cause side effects that weren't as foreseen. Now, I don't know if that's true, but he was saying that might explain why we are seeing a particular rise in heart problems. Doesn't explain the long COVID. I don't know how that would relate to gut health, but maybe it disturbs something in the system which can be sorted out in the gut. I don't have enough medical knowledge to really know that. But I thought it was quite fascinating because
that is fascinating.
He was asked if he knew what he knows now, would he have the vaccines, and he said no. And he's a 60-something-year-old man.
I've seen a couple of his videos, and because he's been very data driven from day one of the pandemic, hasn't he? He's been really, and I haven't watched a lot of them, I have to admit, but I know that I saw the change. I think I saw the change in his. I could be wrong because I haven't watched enough to make a judgment, but I think I saw the change in his, not his demeanour, but his view was, COVID's really bad, and then now he's kind of gone. Actually, what we're seeing, the vaccines could be quite. Because I've read quite a bit on this recently as well. Just because you see it pop up all the time, the amount of heart attacks we've had, and I know from the yellow jacket reporting system, isn't it? It's like the adverse events for the COVID vaccine, the Pfizer vaccine. I think was it? I could be wrong, just for legal purposes. Was it like 1 in 800 or something like that? Was it adverse events?
One of the problems is it's very difficult to measure because mostly it's not reported. I mean, one of the things he said was that the government's own website says that there's a 1 to 2% reporting rate of adverse reactions. So 98% are not reported. Either because people haven't noticed that they've got them, or something has happened but they haven't connected it to the treatment. I mean, this is in general. This is not specific to the vaccines, but so the data that we do have is very limited, and it's very hard to say what caused something. I mean, it can be coincidental with the vaccine.
That is terrifying.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people are having boosters and things just because when it's required for travel, not really for any other reason. That if I have to have
Although
it
luckily,
somewhere.
A lot of the countries have got rid of it now, haven't they? You don't need the COVID certificates anymore.
It depends where you go.
Because I know not Europe. Europe's pretty much you go wherever you want now, don't you? They've dropped all the.
It may have changed now, but I remember Elon Musk said that he had a second booster because he had to get to Germany. They wouldn't let him in.
Oh, really?
Without being double at the time. I don't know when it was, but he had a really bad reaction on his second booster.
Oh, right.
But
that's interesting.
I guess he was really making the point that this is a fundamentally different technology to the AstraZeneca vaccine. Traditional way of modifying an existing virus, and we don't know that much about how it works. We don't know that much about the long-term effects.
It's guesswork. A lot of it.
Yeah, and so of course we should probably be cautious unless we learn otherwise. But He was also. I mean, I was also listening to some people talking about the fact that this wasn't him, but one of the worst times to start giving a vaccine is when there's a pandemic on, because you're exposing the virus to people who haven't got the protection yet. So you've just been vaccinated, but then it takes you 2 weeks to develop your antibodies, your protection. And it's not just the antibodies; it's the interaction between the antibodies and the T cells and other stuff that we don't fully understand yet. And so you're actually giving the virus an opportunity to develop variants by giving a vaccine during a pandemic. If you vaccinate before, if you do something preventative, that's different. So if you have like a flu vaccine that works for that year, that's different. But again, it's one of the downsides of developing a vaccine whilst the pandemic is on is it can lead to more variants. We've certainly had a few, but whether that would have happened anyway, I don't know.
It is. I agree with you. It's weird. Go on.
Well, I was just going to say, what's weird to me is this conversation's not happening in the mainstream.
That's what I was going to get to. That's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah.
I've not seen it anywhere.
No, and it's still shot down, isn't it? It's still, if you bring something up like, the vaccines could have, there's still like a heavy cloak of silence and almost a, don't talk about it. Type thing, which is weird.
It's kind of absent from the agenda. There's, maybe that's the government not wanting to admit any mistakes were made, not wanting to go back over it.
Well, that's the scary thing, isn't it? Because and I'm glad you brought this up, because I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday. We were talking about this, and actually we were talking about a different topic, but I used the pandemic as an example. It was like we never had a logical, thought through discussion of the plus and minuses of how we would deal with what was happening. Okay, it was hysteria, and then it was unbelievable fear, and then it was unbelievable blind trust in not so much the vaccines, but in the institutions that were telling us the vaccines were okay. We didn't have a cost-benefit analysis of lockdown. Cost-benefit analysis of lockdown. We didn't have a cost-benefit analysis of the vaccines. We would just do your duty and get the vaccine, and off you go. I was that way, pretty worried, but not hugely worried at the start, but then very pro-vaccine, and on my social media I was very pro-vaccine and saying, look, people should do it, and I was pushing back against some of the anti-vaccine, rhetoric. But now I think maybe similar to you, because I've been doing quite a lot of reading on it, and you're seeing so many adverse impacts of the vaccine. I would weigh up now as to whether it's worthwhile getting a booster. Do you know what I mean? I would potentially think there's other ways I could deal with it.
I think we should be clear that it's still well worth taking for older people who are particularly at risk, or for people with
immunocompromised, etc. Yeah.
But that isn't everybody, and even people of our age, it's questionable how much benefit, whether the risks outweigh the benefits. Certainly for young people, though, the idea of giving giving young children a vaccine seems crazy.
I agree. I could not agree more. We know it doesn't cause deaths among young, or very tiny. Yeah, I agree. And I think this is where it seems like governments are being pushed by the pharmaceutical companies here. But this will make me sound like a conspiracy theorist, which I'm definitely not. But I was one of the people that got ill for 24 hours after each vaccine that I got, including the booster. So I felt horrendous, but my heart rate went up to 140 to 160 for 24 hours. I've always had a high heart rate anyway. But from the day that I had my first vaccine, and this was the AstraZeneca one, I think. And then it's the same with each one I got, actually. Like, my heart was never the same, and I thought it was in my head. And I kept saying to my wife, I was like, my heartbeat's just crazy. It jumps around like this all the time. I was like, I can't really understand it. And I didn't think anything of it. And then when I had to have an endoscopy and a colonoscopy a few weeks back, they did the pre-op assessments. So they did blood pressure and they did the heart rate. Blood pressure was fine. Heart rate, the nurse looked at the monitors that's bouncing around. She was like, Are you really nervous? I was like, no, I don't feel nervous. Why? She was like, your heart's jumping between. I was like, oh right, okay, yeah, it does that. She's like, I think you've got a problem. I was like, oh, brilliant, great, And then the surgeon came over and he looked at it. He goes, I'm not sure whether you're going into AFib or not. Right. And I didn't really know what it was. No idea. Luckily, I've got private health insurance through my wife's work anyway. So it was like, you need to see a doctor. I was like, okay, fine. He said, it's probably not urgent, but do it. spoke to a Vitality, who we have a health insurance with, GP, and luckily he goes, I'm also a cardiologist, so you're in luck. Yeah, and he was like, look, to be fair, he goes, it sounds like, because I use my watch to measure my heart rate, and he goes, because it's not the Apple Watch, it's a Samsung watch, it's not licensed like the Apple one is. The Apple one is actually nearly 100% accurate, telling if you're in AFib. Because the fact that your watch is telling you that you're in AFib probably means that you are going in and out of it. So we should check it out. But he goes, look, probably nothing to worry about, but we do need to, we'll refer you to a cardiologist. And I said, well, what do you do with something like this? And he was like, well, actually, because the best things you can do are the things we always recommend.
Right.
Better diet, drink less, exercise more, and it's amazing that we never went down that road with COVID. It was almost like we can't say that. It's like, that's crazy, isn't it?
So let's come on to that about other factors like obesity, other risk factors, and other things people can do. But before we do, you reminded me of your case reminds me of something that John Campbell talked about a lot months back. So that's aspiration. So in the old days when they used to give injections, because they give injections typically into your arm. It's convenient. I mean, it could be your thigh, your bum, but obviously your arm's a bit better when you've got lots of people in a queue. And the theory there is to get it into the muscle tissue and have it slowly diffuse, do its thing there in an area that's fairly benign. You might get a reaction. Some people had a sore arm, a dead arm.
Yeah.
But a sore arm, a dead arm doesn't really affect you that much. It doesn't stop you doing things. And in the old days, when they used to give injections, they would put the needle in, so the needle would go into the arm, and then they pull back. It's called aspiration, aspiration. You aspirate, you pull back, and you see if there's any fluid. Because if you've hit a vein instead of muscle in the arm, then you'll see some blood or something come out. And that would tell them that they'd hit a vein and they should reposition the needle and do it again. But they're not trained how to do. That's how the nurses were trained when he was becoming qualified and he was practicing. But these days they're not trained to do that. They just put it in and inject.
Right.
The reasoning given is A, it's quicker, and B, it's only one in a 1,000 cases or one in a few thousand cases that you actually will hit a vein. So the risk is low. But what he always said was, well, if you do hit a vein, what will happen is that everything you inject will be carried straight to the heart.
The heart, yeah.
And then that's where you're going to get these cardio problems.
Oh, I see.
And so
right, yeah.
It's only a theory, but that might have happened in your case, for example, and not in lots of other people's cases. Because
that's
if you hit a vein, you've got the blood being pumped around very quickly under high pressure, so you'll get that reaction.
That is interesting.
So again, he was kind of saying, well, why on earth don't they aspirate? Because that would make it safer. And all he was saying was, it's a possible explanation. So why don't we do it anyway? Because we used to do it, and it's simple.
It makes sense, yeah.
And no one was interested in. Some people, when they went to get vaccinated, asked about that, and they were lucky enough to have a nurse that knew about it and could do it. But lots of people who went, they either hadn't heard of it, or didn't know how to do it, or weren't willing to do it because they said, well, we've been trained to do it this way. So I think there are lots of things like that, which and this business of repurposing existing drugs to see if they have an effect. This was the whole ivermectin and other substances debate. That if things had been a bit more open-minded, we would have tried a lot of that. Because something like that, a very safe drug that's been used for years, that's proved not to have bad reactions, you may as well try it out. But because there was such a strong control of the narrative and desire to not tell people things that might upset them or make them make the wrong decision, none of that was possible. But what concerns me, perhaps that's not surprising, but what concerns me is we haven't had that debate since. It's just we're just not talking about it.
Yeah, I agree.
At least in the mainstream, I don't see it being talked about. There's plenty of stuff online.
But even online, though, if you bring this stuff up, you're still tarred with that kind of anti-vaxxer brush.
You're conspiracy theorist, or you're killing people because what you're saying may discourage people to take the vaccine.
Yeah. And the
But
other thing about the heart thing
yeah,
is that heart and myocarditis, heart inflammation, is actually also one of the impacts of COVID virus itself, isn't it? So they were
yes,
saying it's very hard to tell whether it's caused by the vaccine or whether it's caused by COVID. And that creates a problem because all the people that are more vaccine cautious, I won't call them anti-vaxxers, but vaccine cautious, are going, every single case of myocarditis or a heart attack is caused by the vaccine. Everyone that's very
yeah.
pro-vaccine is going, well, no, every heart attack is caused by the long-term damage
Well,
from COVID, for example.
I mean, there's been a survey. So this was talked about recently. There's been a study, not survey, a study in Germany which found evidence of the spike protein in the heart of some people who died of that, and that is evidence that the vaccine was present in the heart, doing its thing in the heart. So there has been a study that has shown that. Now, what we need is other studies to see if that study can replicate. So the evidence, there's evidence that it's possible is starting to come out. But yeah, well, I mean, this is unfortunately the problem every time you go against the narrative, whatever it is, that people will accuse you of being a conspiracy theorist. But if you're right, it's not a theory.
It's
a genuine conspiracy, right? So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
and I think I think we do know that there was a conspiracy not to tell people things. I mean, there was the mask wearing thing was theatre to make it seem like to do something very visible that would make people feel reassured, feel better. And they knew that it was unlikely to have much effect. Certainly, the kind of mask that most of us are wearing. And you know, they thought, well, this is a conspiracy worth having because it will help people.
Yeah.
But it was telling a lie, or not revealing the whole truth, in my opinion.
God, who knows where we'll be in 5 years and what truths will actually come out. It is frightening, though, isn't it? Because obviously the vaccine manufacturers are immune to prosecution. You know, they can't be held liable.
Oh yeah. Well, and there were cases like the one of the guys who won the Nobel Prize for discovering ivermectin, Japanese guy, Japanese scientist. He offered to do a study on whether or not ivermectin made any difference with COVID, and whichever pharmaceutical company it was, I can't remember which one, who owns the or came up with ivermectin, refused.
So really,
we're going to develop a new drug, and you know, you think, well, what are the reasons for that? Well, one of the reasons is that ivermectin costs, a few pence per dose, and you can't make money out of it. So you can say that's cynical, but and part of it, I think, is that pharmaceutical companies, it takes so long, it's so expensive to develop new drugs. They need a guaranteed revenue. So part of it I have sympathy with. But I just think, well, why wasn't a government funding that study then and saying, all right,
I agree.
Pharmaceutical companies don't want to do it, we'll study it. And don't you remember there was going to be a commission, an inquiry on COVID? Boris promised us an inquiry.
It hasn't happened yet.
It hasn't happened. It's gone completely dead. No one wants to go back over that.
The EU, though, I saw a video a few weeks back, and it was, again, I think it was in the European Parliament, and they were questioning, like one of the heads of Pfizer, and this is when the whole transmission thing came out. So did you test for transmission? No, we didn't. What? You know, don't you think you should? You know.
Well, not only that, they definitely misled us because they led us to believe it would. Affect
and everyone from
say we haven't
Biden down was saying it would. But there was I know that there's a lot of questions being asked in the EU now, in the EU Parliament and some of their regulatory bodies. I saw a video again. I think I can't remember what it was, but it was again, it had like a medical doctor and it had some other professor, and they were talking about this. And the medical doctors, I think, kind of reiterated what you and I have already said. It was like, look, we know now that maybe for young people, there's no point in them having the vaccine. The risks you're weighing up to small risks, but you're still weighing up risks. And the other lady, though, was a lot more forceful. And she was like, people are going to end up in prison over this. Because people at Pfizer or wherever are going to end up in prison because they lied. You know, and I was just like, and she was, again, proper, not a conspiracy theorist, anti-vaxxer, anything like that. Sensible, strong track record behind her, all that stuff. And it's like, God, So I'll be honest with you, it does worry me a little bit, because what if, my issues, which the doctor thinks isn't big, but I'm going to the cardiologist this Friday coming. But hypothetically, what if they look and go, oh, actually, your heart is damaged? I'm like, well, I can't get a new one, can I? So, oh my God. But what if it comes out and there are millions of people? So again, it's the cost-benefit analysis, isn't it? I wish I'd been a bit stronger, perhaps, but I trusted the institutions, and hopefully I was right to do so. But if years from now it comes out, okay, COVID would have killed X, but actually the vaccine has ended up killing Y, or harming this amount of people. Well, we never had a choice in it, did we? We should have had a choice in it, really. But, I know.
Yeah,
it's a tough one. Why did we go down the exercise route? I think it was mentioned on maybe 2 or 3 mainstream sources, not many. They said the risk factors are, overweight, heart disease, metabolic syndrome, all the rest of it. If you've got those, you're more likely to be, have a higher risk of a bad outcome. And I think this was, it may have been on the Joe Rogan podcast or one of the others I was listening to. It was like, that was the perfect, it was Bill Maher. It was Bill Maher, I think. It was like, that was the perfect opportunity to be honest with America about the obesity problem that they face, because we have the fattest population on the planet. You've got a virus that is much more likely to cause severe outcomes if you're fat. We need to do something about our diet and our lifestyle. Did they? No, that became taboo because you're fat shaming and and all the rest of it. And like, oh my God, and it's crazy. It feels like we jump to the pharmaceutical solution, don't we? Rather than the good old, well, actually, maybe we should lose some weight, eat a bit healthier, do a bit of exercise. I don't like hearing that.
Well, it's easy to take a pill. And, you don't. It's not hard work. So
no, I'm all for it.
You don't have to take responsibility.
I'm all for it. Yeah.
I think you're right, and I think there should be a lot more discussion of that. And it worries me that there isn't. It worries me that everything's just quiet now. And it worries me that the studies aren't being done that should be being done to find out what are the long-term effects.
Yeah, I agree.
I think it needs government funding. It needs government to push it. Maybe that will come out of Europe.
I hope so.
But fascinating what you've mentioned. I should look it up and.
Your Guts Plus or Your Gut Plus, one of them. It's something that I don't know enough about to comment on. I was doing some very brief, YouTubing of this earlier on, looking for more stuff on probiotics and whatnot. And I watched the Dr. Tim Spector podcast on Diary of CEO a couple of weeks back, where and he's the one that has a Zoe app. He talks about the microbiome and all the rest of it. And he's convinced, like that. I'm paraphrasing badly here, but so much of our health is linked to our microbiome. There's so many things that we now take a pill for, or that we even potentially psychological stuff. Like a lot of it is going to be linked to the microbiome. We're discovering more and more about it. So he was like, as long as you eat 30 types of plants, a week, you'll be fine. You would actually live a much healthier life. And then, but I was speaking to a friend about it. It's like, I wouldn't even know where to find 30 plants. I genuinely have no idea. So, but I think that's where this Your Gut Plus thing, like the doctor or the professor that created that, he was like, because it's a pill format, we can pack it with a lot more higher numbers of whatever it is that you would get naturally. You pack it in, and it's like boom, it's like a nuclear bomb in the system in terms of your microbiome. So I think that whole field is fascinating now, and it's more and more of it seems to be coming out, particularly along the line of personalised healthcare. Because Tim Spector was saying this as well. He was like, "There's no pill that's going to work for everybody because everybody's microbiome is different. So you find what works for you."
Yeah, absolutely. Personalised healthcare is the future. It's going to be fantastic because you'll be able to treat people according to their specific needs, not the average statistical need in the population. So fascinating that's starting already. I shall look into it, and good luck with it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to order it, see if it has any. I don't have long COVID, but as a non-COVID sufferer, as somebody who doesn't have long COVID but has other issues, I'm curious whether or not this will help. It can't hurt because it's just good bacteria. So let's see what happens, and hope to God my heart's okay. That's the bigger. That's the bigger thing. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Awesome.
Well, lovely talking to you.
You too, indeed.
Until next time, Jamie. Take care.
Yep. See you a week from today. See you later.
Yeah. Bye-bye.